Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenborough, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Aston Villa by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew, Cheku Kouyaté and Jeffrey Schlupp after the game. So let's begin. Crystal Palace marched to victory over Aston Villa at Selhurst Park on Saturday afternoon, being the dominant of the two sides from the first whistle and earning their 3 points through a fine-looking Jordan Ayew, who bagged against his former club late into the game. The game opened with both teams struggling to drive their way through the congestion of the two dynamic midfields, each side switching from a 4-3-3 to a 4-5-1 when forced onto the back foot. The result meant the opening 20 minutes hosted few chances, with the busy pitch seeing more fouls and rough challenges than shots on goal. Looking to control the ball rather than strike it first time, McCarthy was outdone by a cluster of Villa bodies. Reacting to the rebound, Jeffrey Schlupp was denied in similar fashion by a dense crowd in front of him and struck into a fall of visitors. McCarthy found himself involved again in a situation mirroring his first effort, but this time he struck a whipped cross first time, unlucky to chip the ball over the bar. The near miss seemed to capitalise a series of chances for the hosts, who had until then seen little action in the opponent's half. Firstly, the unlikely threat of Cheku Kouyaté looped a header inches over the bar, before Schlupp cannoned the volley off the turf and into Tom Heaton's gloves. Barely a minute later, former villain Ayew stretched in an attempt to bury McCarthy's low cross, but he was just too late to make contact. The game then lulled for a deceptive while, before the Eagles launched another charge at the visiting goal, keeping 33-year-old Heaton alert as the first half wound down. Following Wilfred Zaha knocking a volley over under pressure, Luka Milivojevic found a target with a tricky free kick, catching out everyone in the stadium bar Heaton, who got down early to push wide the Serbians' deceptive low effort. Kouyaté was next to try his luck, again latching onto a cross at the back post with his head, but the Senegalese could only head down into the ground and up into the latex of Heaton's gloves. Villa opened the half either spooked or chastised by Palace's first half charges and kicked off by launching themselves at the Eagles' goal. But after a minute spent unnerving the hosts, the opposition settled back into their deeper shape and Roy Hodgson's men regained their dominance. Palace's dominance was then given an added advantage when Trezeguet received his marching orders for a bookable foul on Joe Ward in the first half and another on Zaha in the second. Capitalising on Villa's disruption, Palace began to launch themselves at the visitors. Milivojevic came close to taking the lead in dramatic fashion as he unleashed a powerful attempt at the Lions' goal, curling a ball with pace only to be denied by the leaping Heaton. McCarthy and Ayew also came close, with the former teeing himself up to try his luck with an overhead kick, which flew past the Villa post and the latter whipping wide from distance. Finally, after 73 minutes spent knocking, Palace broke through Villa's defensive seal and it was Ayew, against his former club and standout performer on the pitch, who earned the opener. Laid off by fellow Ghanaian international Schlupp, Ayew ran to the byline, burst through Tyrone Mings and Grealish with poise, and rifled Selhurst Park into his first Vishorious celebrations of the season. Palace's celebrations were nearly curtailed in devastating fashion when their net bulged from Henry Lansbury's effort with seconds remaining. But Grealish hitting the turf was adjudged to have been simulation, and the last-minute equaliser was ruled out to Selhurst's elation. As the rain hammered down in SE25, Palace held on to see out a physical final 10 minutes and earned their victory with conviction and immense relief over a largely suffocated Aston Villa. So I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on both Twitter and Facebook at Crystal Palace for all the latest Palace news. So if you are someone like myself who does like to follow a vast array of Palace accounts on both Twitter and Facebook, then of course do head over to the respective sites and follow our accounts at Crystal Palace. Now alongside sort of the latest Palace news, so whether that be sort of stuff about the stadium, stuff about the academy, stuff about the ladies team, or sort of stuff on the injury front I suppose as well, alongside that sort of general news we also do keep it up to date with all the latest transfer news. So whilst the transfer window is now basically it's shutting in a few hours as I'm recording this in the rest of Europe. Of course, it's going to be shut there, but there's still going to be rumours in the run up to January. So obviously a good reason to follow us is so you can keep up to date with all the latest transfer news. And you just got to sort of look at what we've done over the summer in terms of, as soon as we find an article, we put it out there, leave it for you guys to discuss. So if you are someone who wants to get involved in that and wants to sort of keep up to date whilst also, you know, giving your opinion to some of these rumours, of course feel free to follow us. And then alongside that, sort of any interviews, whether that be with players, with management, with agents as well, because there's been a few of those over the summer. Of course, feel free to also follow us there as well, because much like transfer news, as soon as we find one of these, we'll either put out a link to it or put the video up on Twitter. So if you do want to get involved in that as well, of course feel free to follow us. And then, like every other sort of Twitter and Facebook page, we obviously post our own opinions on there. So before the game, we sort of give our predictions, what we think of the lineup when it's announced, and of course after the game, giving that instant match reaction. But then as well as that, we also just post general views and opinions about Palace, whether that be stuff about the academy, the stadium, whether that be even about injury news, talking about actually how are we going to change the team with certain players being out. So all different things, a vast array of things we do discuss in the account. So if you're someone who wants to get involved in that before games, after games, of course head over once again to the respective sites so you can follow us there. Now, another place for you guys to share your opinion is of course in the YouTube comments. So obviously feel free to drop below the podcast, you know, with your player ratings, obviously where you comment below with your ratings, where you rate the players' performances from 1 to 10. Obviously that's with 10 being the best. And the reason I want you guys to do that is that I've got my opinion of the players and how they performed, and of course I'm going to obviously go through each of them and discuss it. But what I want you guys to do is so that I can see how you thought the players performed and compare your opinion to mine. I also want you guys to get involved and just comment below with your player ratings. Now, even if you don't want to do that, obviously the comment section is obviously open to any other sort of views you have about the game. So stuff about the decision at the end, obviously the disallowed goal for Villa, you know, other decisions throughout the game which you might want to comment on. Anything else, any sort of talking points in the game that you want to discuss, obviously feel free to also comment them below. And also any questions you might have for me, because there may be things you disagree with, things you think I've missed. So anything like that you want to add in, of course feel free to do that. So of course, once again, it just gives me that chance to actually view and read what you guys have to say about the game, and obviously compare that opinion to my own and possibly have a discussion about it, because I'm always open to have discussions about it. And it's not just for me as well to read on it, you know. Any fans who come to the video, whether they be Palace or Villa fans, they can obviously listen to my opinions in the podcast, but also read the comment section as well, once again leading to that whole discussion, that whole sort of everyone sort of looking at each other's opinion and sort of building a wider base, I suppose, of their general opinion of the game. So if you do want to get involved, of course the YouTube comment section is a great place for you to do that. And of course, you know, if there are any Villa fans who find themselves here, obviously you're going to be deeply disappointed with that disallowed goal right at the end of the game. Obviously there's a lot to discuss about that, whereas a Palace perspective, a nice solid performance at home where we actually dominated for a change. So you're looking at two perspectives going, Villa will be a little bit disappointed even though they didn't play great, whereas a Palace perspective we're thinking we are a bit lucky with that at the end, but realistically we dominated the whole game, so it was right that we went on to win. And you know, I suppose you've got to look at it both ways. And I think, you know, what I'm going to talk about in a minute, you know, talking about players and adding things in about the game, I do think we've got a fairly sort of balanced opinion of the game. Now, if you do want to follow any of the social media pages that I've mentioned or join the Facebook group, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, starting to go with Vicente Gaeta, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Gaeta's performance, I've given him a 6, and that's basically because he had a few saves here and there, but on the whole didn't actually have to do much in the game, so I can't really give him anything higher than a 6. But in talking about his whole season as a whole, obviously we've played 4 games so far. 2 of those we've kept clean sheets, and obviously we've got the 2 wins and 1 draw as well. So actually, in terms of the team, we've actually had a good start to the season, obviously on 7 points now, but also Gaeta in particular has had a really good start to the season, in the fact that we've only conceded, I think it's 2 goals, isn't it? And the fact that we've kept the 2 clean sheets as well. So obviously you could look at the whole defence to do that, because if the defence is playing solidly, then they can't get through and they can't obviously score against your goalkeeper. but equally you've got to look at Gaeta and go, this guy's also plays his part in the defence, even if the defence in front of him gives him good cover. When called upon, Gaeta still has to make the saves, and the fact that he's done that, and the stats are now there to back him up, the fact that we've only conceded 2 goals, we've got the best defensive record in the league in terms of goals conceded, we're up there in terms of clean sheets, so the fact that we've started this season so well by actually playing with a solid base, and the attacking problem was at the beginning, the last first 2 games or so, and now we've continued to have that solid base, and as we saw at the weekend, if we continue to put pressure on the opposition, then eventually we'll break through and score. So it's nice to see now that we've got that defensive base and we're starting to develop it even further up the pitch. But in terms of this performance in particular, like I said, didn't really have much to do, and what he did do, they were basically routine saves whenever Villa applied some pressure, and it was particularly early on, because I think as the game went on, we didn't really see that much from Villa, but particularly quite early on, that was the only real time where you saw sort of pure Villa pressure, and I think Gaeta made these routine saves like he always does, obviously to keep Villa out, and it's really important to do it early on in the game, so you've got to give Gaeta credit for that. But like I said, basically for the rest of the game had very little to do, but did the basics well, and that's something you want to see from your keeper. You want to see that if they're not going to be called upon for the whole game, that one or two chances that actually the opposition have, you want him to be able to be there to save them, to catch the ball, whatever he has to do, and that's exactly what he done here. So once again here, Gaeta, good start to the season, and once again another good performance, so I do think he does deserve the 6 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the first player in our defence, and that is the right back Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of Joe Ward, obviously there was a lot of speculation after Tuesday night as to whether him and Patrick Vanana were injured. Obviously they weren't involved in that game, and obviously some of the comments that Roy Hodgson came out with after the game suggested that he said they were unavailable, which we all thought they were probably injured, but actually it was more though that they were just precautionary things. Joe Ward didn't train all week but still played obviously on Saturday, and of course Patrick Vanana, probably just because he was knackered from the win against Manchester United, was obviously just dropped for that game. So whilst there was all that speculation, obviously Joe Ward, one of these players, had a little bit of had a knock throughout the week, but still was able to play, so returned to the side at right back, and I think the 7 I've given him is a fair reflection of his performance, because I think he was dependable, has always done a shift at right back, made it difficult for the Villa players, and when you consider we dominated large spells of the game, it was obviously down to our midfield players as well, obviously frustrating Villa, but actually whenever Villa did come forward, people like Ward and the rest of the defence, to be honest, were just making sure that people like Grealish, who we know how good he can be on his day, just making sure that players like him obviously couldn't get into the area. And I think, Ward in particular, obviously having to contain the wide players, I think he made a couple of really important interceptions, throughout the game, which of course kept us in it. And I talked about with Gaeta in terms of our stats this season, only conceding 2 goals, 2 clean sheets. Ward's been a major part of this. Yes, the Sheffield United game, he weren't that great, but actually aside from that, he's been great. And this is another performance where he's done a shift for the team, nothing necessarily spectacular, but made these interceptions when he needs to, sliding challenges, stopping crosses coming in, which of course was great to see. Now there was one in particular, obviously a really great header at the back post, and obviously that was when it was 1-0 to Palace, obviously Villa looking for that equaliser, and of course Ward positioned himself right there at the back post to obviously head it clear. So that chance in particular epitomises what Joe Ward is about. He may not do anything spectacular in the game, but when called upon, he can make these interceptions, or as we saw there, just put his body on the line or put his head on the line to obviously make that header and clear the danger. So overall, I was fairly impressed with his performance, and considering I was quite worried at the beginning of the season, the fact that we've only got one right back, and the lack of competition and the lack of cover as well might be a worry for us. But if Joe Ward can touch wood, keep fit at least till January, and just continue the way he's playing in terms of to this standard, that of course would be great to see, because it was another good performance from him. And whether it's the fact that he's got someone like Gary Cahill in the defence now, with that little bit of experience added in, seems to have helped him, or it's just the fact that he's just bucked up his game basically from last season because he's got no competition now, because he's the number 1 man. Whatever it is, it's nice to see his performances improving from last season. So once again here, I think Joe Ward deserves the 7 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the first centre-back, and that is Martin Kelly, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Martin Kelly's performance, I can't really talk too much about him. Obviously, he got substituted sort of midway through the game. But in terms of the time he was on the pitch, I think he put in a steady shift for Palace. You know, obviously playing as that main centre-back alongside Gary Cahill. And I think as a partnership, they work really well. They complement each other. And the fact that we got a clean sheet was mainly down to these two guys playing as well as they did at the back. But of course, Kelly got taken off, obviously picked up a little knock sort of midway through. I say midway through the game, it was more sort of midway through the second half. But the fact is, the time he was on the pitch, he'd done what he had to do, put in a steady shift, you know, making these tackles and challenges when he has to. And in terms of Villa being quite limited in the amount of chances they had, it was primarily down to our midfield, obviously stopping them and slowing down their game, but also people like Kelly and Cahill actually standing up and making themselves count. But I can't really give him anything other than a 6, mainly because the time he was on the pitch, he'd done what he had to do, and of course the fact that he got taken off after picking a knock, we couldn't really quite see enough of him. And I suppose the only good thing, it's not good to see a player go off of a knock, but the only good thing is that Mamadou Sakho is back now from his injury. He obviously came on to replace him. So if there is any problems with Martin Kelly, if he is out for a few weeks, which I don't think he is, he's got the international break, he'll probably be back by then. But even still, the fact that we've got someone now like Sakho coming back not only is good in terms of if there is an injury there, but also brings back that competition for places. So that centre-back position is slowly getting back to its old self, with Tompkins now slowly getting back into training. So with all our centre-backs now coming back, it's going to be a really strong position for us. And not only in terms of cover, but in terms of that competition is going to obviously push players to their limits to obviously get that place in the team. Because I think it's almost guaranteed now that Gary Cahill's going to start, because he's started the season so well. So that position for that second centre-back spot is going to be thought about between, you know, Kelly, Dan, Sakho and Tompkins. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens over the next few weeks or so. But once again, Martin Kelly here, nothing too great, nothing too bad. So I do think these 6 overall is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the second centre-back, and that is of course Gary Cahill, who I'm going to give an 8 overall. Now, what can I say about this guy? Because he was fantastic last weekend, obviously his first start for Palace, and we got the win against Old Trafford. Of course, stays in the team this weekend and was absolutely superb again, hence why I've given him an 8. Now, I could talk about the Grealish thing. I might as well talk about that because, of course, he was involved in it. Now, for me, it's sort of 50-50 for me, because on another day, that probably would be given, either as a penalty or the goal would have stood. But the way VAR works in a minute, because the referee blew the whistle before the goal was scored, obviously play has to be stopped, and because VAR saw it and it wasn't a clear and obvious error for the penalty scenario with Grealish, that's why the referee's decision stood, and of course Grealish was booked for diving. So for me, I think it's quite a soft one, even though Grealish sort of, as he's running through, he's leaving his back leg trailing, so of course it's easy for he's going to trip over Gary Cahill. But then equally, I've seen some people say that Gary Cahill at the last minute tried to pull out of the challenge. So there's loads of speculation, loads of different views about this. But for me personally, I think that even if they I don't think they necessarily deserve to get that goal, because I think we were just the better side throughout the 90 minutes. But I still feel a bit sorry for them in the fact that, yes, it was a little bit soft. It probably would have been a soft dive or a soft penalty, because I personally think it's sort of 50-50 as to whether it's a dive or not. But I don't really think they would have warranted that, even though it might have been a good goal because Grealish got the pass away and the finish was good. I just think purely based on the fact that, you know, there was the slightest of touches, Grealish left his leg hanging behind him, and the fact that VAR said it wasn't a clear and obvious error, so the referee's decision stood anyway. I think all of these things put together, I think is you know, what happened in the game, I think was correct in the end of the day. And I'm not just saying that because it was an advantage to us. I'm just saying that because on reflection, looking back at it, looking back at the rules, it seems like it was the right decision. But moving on, aside from obviously that one moment with Gary Cahill, I've given him the 8 because throughout the whole game, once again, showed his leadership skills, showed that quality he's got, showed that experience, just in the way he was able to marshal the defence, the way he was able to contain Villa, and literally everything they threw at us, he was just able to contain with it individually, but also obviously help the other defensive players around him. Now, obviously his experience showed through in the fact that he was able to marshal the Palace back line, and I think that's something that we're really going to find really useful over the next sort of season and a half, obviously, that Cahill's with us, because that experience in terms of telling other players when to go forward, when to go back, and making sure everyone's in the right position, that seemed to really help us against Villa, and obviously helped us against Man United as well the week before. So the fact that we've got that experience now from Gary Cahill, as well as the fact that he's playing well as well, making challenges, winning headers, battling for the ball as well. So the fact that he's combining that experience, that leadership, and just the general skill and quality he's got on the ball was fantastic to see. And, you know, aside from that Grealish incident, which of course I discussed, he barely put a foot wrong in the game. And, you know, I suppose the only word you can really use is just a fine, because that's what his display was. It was a fine display from him, done exactly what you would expect from him, plus more. And it's the second week in a row that I've given him an 8, which really just goes to show the quality he's got in the fact that he's using all of his skills, all of his experience to obviously defend well against the opposition, regardless of who they are. Because against Man United, didn't let that sort of get to him, and he just performed like he always did in this game here again. Once again, we haven't been that great at home, so he just stood up, made himself count, and put in a shift for the side and contained Villa, which of course was great to see. So once again here, Gary Cahill, great performance from him, fully deserving of the 8 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the final player in our back four, and that is the left back Patrick Vanana, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now this one may come as a surprise, because I've seen a few people give him 7s, a few people give him 6s, so there's a little bit of a varied view from Palace fans as to how they rate his performance. But in terms of me, I think the 6 is a fair result, in the fact that there was nothing necessarily outstanding about his game, but likewise there was nothing terrible about his game, so I do think the 6 overall is a fair result. Now obviously with him playing at left back, obviously because Aston Villa weren't necessarily targeting us or weren't really attacking us that much down that side, it obviously allowed Vanana to play a lot more further forward than he has been doing this season, and obviously we know he can play further forward, so it was good to see him actually get back to his old self in terms of his attacking play. So it was nice to see him getting forward at every opportunity. And whilst, you know, there was one opportunity in particular where the ball fell to him inside the box towards the end of the first half, and obviously he wasted that opportunity, but the fact that he's actually in that position shows that sort of the attacking side of his play is starting to come back, because of course sort of the end of last season, other than a few goals he scored, and of course the beginning of this season, we haven't really seen that attacking part of his game. So it's nice to see here against Villa where because he wasn't really being attacked that much by the opposition, it just allowed him to go further forward. He took full advantage of that, and yes, probably should have done better with that opportunity. You know, if the ball falls to anyone inside the box, you expect them to do better, but certainly like someone like Vanana, who we know can be clinical in front of goal, and particularly, you know, it was just before the end of the first half, so a really great time to score, going 1-0 up, so it would have been great to see him score that opportunity. But likewise, it's an improvement, I suppose, the way to look at it, in the fact that he at least got into that position in the first place. Now I suppose the good part of his play was of course the attacking play, and of course the fact that we kept a clean sheet. He had his role to play in that, done relatively well against Villa, and we know people like Grealish could be quite tricky to deal with. So I think on the whole, not necessarily just Grealish, but on the whole I think he defended well. But you know, the reason I've given him the 6 as opposed to a 7, which I've seen quite a lot of people give him, is just a few mistakes on the ball. You know, yes, his play was good going forward, but then there were a few times where he just, you know, gave the ball away. Little things, didn't really punish us, but these few little mistakes, if you completely get them out of your game, then it would have been a 7 out of 10 performance, because you would have been so effective in the game. But because there were little few mistakes on the ball, which is understandable, sometimes when you're a fullback playing so high up the pitch, sometimes you're going to make mistakes, but you know, just a few too many for me to give him a 7 as opposed to the 6 I've given him. So once again here, Patrick Vanana, a good performance from the left back, and certainly one way he was back to his old self in terms of his attacking play. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our midfield, and that's the captain Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now once again, this is another one that came up for debate. Obviously a few people giving him different ratings, but I think the 7 is a fair reflection overall. Now, one of the things I liked about his game is just the fact that even though Villa weren't necessarily that great in the game, whenever they did have anything good in the midfield, Luka was there to make these fouls in the midfield. And, you know, yes, he struggled to get his own game going early on, but the fact that he didn't let that affect him and still put in challenges, particularly early on and then obviously throughout the rest of the game, the fact that he committed the few fouls and, you know, he still made these challenges was of course good to see. But I suppose the only negative of that is the fact that because he started the game quite slowly early on, obviously it resulted in him making a few of these fouls. But then likewise you could look at it and go, yes, these are fouls and it's because he's quite slow to get the game started, but then equally it's actually good because he's breaking up play, even though it should be tackles and challenges rather than fouls, but he's still breaking up the play, still making it difficult for Villa, which of course is good to see. So even though he was slow to get going and he struggled to get going early on in the game, hence why some people have given him 6s, I actually think that, you know, just being that disruptor in the midfield is something he done relatively well. So hence why I've given him a 7. But the thing I really like about his performance is that he's always professional. You know, if he starts the game slowly or isn't quite into it, as the game goes on, he seems to get into it more, and certainly that was the case here, where his actual influence in the game grew as it went on. So, you know, there are a few times where he's on the edge of the area, the ball comes to him, he has a shot. You know, there was one in particular which, you know, literally curled it top corner, was going top bins, and forced Tom Heaton into a save. So not only was he actually committing these fouls, some good, some bad, but also making these challenges, he also combined that with that ability, that influence to actually be that man in the midfield who can drive forward, be available for a pass. And then, as we saw with the 2 chances he had in particular, he's gone to have shots from just outside the area. Obviously, one of them wide, and of course the other one forcing Heaton into a save. So the fact that he came close to scoring on a couple of occasions, combining that with his overall sort of good sort of disrupting performance, I suppose, in the midfield, by actually disrupting and disorganising Villa's play, was of course great to see. And I suppose another negative, and I suppose another reason why people have given him 6 is it's just the fact that he was booked towards the end of the game, and you know, not really too much to talk about there. But you know, I think on the whole, I think the 7 is a fair result, because even though he started the game quite slowly, he grew into it, and particularly in terms of his attacking play, in terms of having chances, being available on the edge of the area, that was something I was quite impressed with his game. So once again, Luka Milivojevic here, the captain, I do think the 7 is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to his midfield partner, and that is Cheku Kouyaté, who I'm going to give a 6 overall. Now, in terms of Kouyaté's performance, I've given him a 6, and like what I said for quite a few players, it was a performance where, yes, we know how good he can be, and he was really good against Man United, and this was a performance where some people said he was good, some people said he was average. I personally think he was quite average in the game, and there were parts of the game where he had impact and he had an influence, but I just think overall, I think the 6 is a fair reflection. Now, the thing I liked about his performance, and because Luka was playing a little bit more deeper, it allowed Kouyaté to go quite far forward, and the fact that he found himself in quite a number of forward positions was actually quite advantageous, I suppose, for us, because it allowed him to help out in the attack. So a number of times where we've got the ball into the box and Kouyaté was there, when we had set pieces, Kouyaté would be one of the first men in the box, and then there was a few times where he's obviously headed it over, one of them headed into the hands of Heaton. So there were a number of times where actually not only was he positionally getting into good positions to help out the attack, but actually in terms of set pieces, corners in particular, he was there to be that man at the far post to head it down. Yes, none of them came to anything, but just that intent on, you know, 2 occasions in particular where he headed it down was of course great to see. And for me, yes, he was great at driving forward, and he was great in an attacking sense, and you know, he was always combative and he uses his physicality like he always does. But for me, the fact that he just lacked that final pass to, obviously, yes, you're getting into good positions, but you don't have that final bit to obviously complete the move, or the fact that he didn't have the composed finish when he was in good position. So a few times where he could have had shots, obviously going back to the headers, could he have done better? Maybe one of them, the other one, well, Heaton saved it, so maybe not. So whilst I understand people saying he was really good in an attacking sense, that sort of tenacity he brought to the midfield was something which, you know, we should have brought into the team earlier on in the season, because, you know, against Sheffield United, we could have done with him, because as we saw against United, as we saw in parts against Villa, he is very effective in the midfield. But for me, just that sort of lack of that final pass, that lack of quality in the final third, is why I've given him the 6 as opposed to a 7. Obviously, feel free to comment below with your thoughts, but I do think the fact that this sort of lineup, or the midfield lineup in particular, is what people predicted. I personally didn't predict it. I thought Max Meyer might continue to play there, but anyhow, I think that possibly, knowing Roy Hodgson, sort of Kouyaté playing alongside Luka and MacArthur could be our midfield going forward, or maybe someone like Jeffrey Slutt might come into there and we might play Andros back in the team. Whichever way you look at the midfield, obviously comment below with your thoughts. But I do think, on the back of the Man United performance, off the back of the Villa performance here, I do think that sort of midfield three staying on for the rest of the season, and certainly Kouyaté will be a major part in that. So once again here, I do think Kouyaté deserves the 6 I've given him. So now I'm going to move on to the final player in our midfield, and that is James MacArthur, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now, before I talk about his general performance, I might as well talk about a few chances he had in the game, and in particular in the first half he had a few good chances. Obviously one in particular, the ball's come into him, and obviously he skied his effort from just inside the box when he really should have hit the target. You know, the ball, a great ball being delivered in, and he's literally sort of in line with the penalty spot, and he's literally tried to take a touch. I keep saying literally, but he tried to take a touch, but rather than sort of hitting it first time, he's took that touch and then he's blazed it over. So one chance there in particular where MacArthur got into a really great position, almost finished the chance, but because he took that one extra touch, it went over. A few other opportunities as well where of course he was through on goal, really should have hit the target. But once again, like what I said with Luca, it's nice to see actually our midfield players getting involved in our attacking play and actually having chances in and around the penalty area, which of course for MacArthur in particular was really, really great to see, because as we know, previous seasons he's scored quite a lot of important goals for us. Well, I say important goals, he scored a lot of goals for us, some of them very important in terms of winning games. So I do think once again MacArthur, it was nice to see him actually getting into these advanced positions. And I suppose the reason I've given him a 7 is because his overall midfield work was good. Like Chiarte, that tenacity to cover a lot of ground, get involved if you have to, frustrate Villa, which I feel he did. And the fact that he combined that, much like Luca, in terms of getting into some very good positions, just working hard, having that good work rate to just do whatever you can to frustrate Villa, was of course really great to see. So there isn't really much more to say about MacArthur, other than the fact that it was just a really hard worked performance where of course he got into good positions. So I do think the 7 I've given him is a fair result. So I'm now going to move on to the first player in our front three, and that is Jeffrey Slupp, who I'm going to give a 7 overall. Now in terms of the formation we were playing, obviously I discussed about the midfield. We were playing the midfield three with MacArthur, Chiarte and Luca, and obviously going forward we were playing a front three with Jeffrey Slupp on the left, Wilfried Zaha on the right and Jordan Ayew up top. And of course throughout periods of the game this sort of changed to a 4-4-2 with maybe someone like Slupp going further wide and of course Wilfried Zaha joining Ayew up top. So there, whichever way you look at our formation, it was mainly these three playing up top, and certainly Jeffrey Slupp, I've given him a 7 because I do think he does deserve that, based on his work both playing quite narrow on the left and playing quite wide on the left as well. Now, one thing in particular I really liked about his game is how he supported Jordan Ayew, and we saw that against Man United last weekend. Obviously he was the guy who headed the ball down into Ayew's path, and it was the same one here again where obviously Jeffrey Slupp made a great run, played the ball on the outside of the defender for Jordan Ayew to run through on. He's obviously got past the two defenders and scored. So yet again, that sort of link-up play between Slupp and Ayew seemed to be working really well, and that of course was great to see. And I suppose one of the benefits of that is that, yes, Ayew may not be one of the most physical players because he's quite short in comparison to other strikers we have, your Benteke's and your Wickhams. So having someone like Jeffrey Slupp to support you and actually helping you seemed to not only help Ayew in the game and not helped Ayew throughout the whole season because he seems to be doing really well. Actually, it's helping Slupp as well because he looked a great threat in the game because, yes, he was going forward to support Jordan Ayew, but just that pace that Jeffrey Slupp's got actually made him look so much more of a threat. And I think that's something I really like to see from people like Slupp, in the fact that, he may not be the best I suppose technical player in terms of maybe his passing is not always on key, but actually he is a threat because he can use his pace, he can cut inside and he can score goals, and it's really nice to see actually his threat throughout the game. Now obviously I suppose the downside, and one of the reasons why some people may have given him a 6, is just that things didn't quite happen for him. So whilst he was that good attacking threat and whilst he was supporting Jordan Ayew, that sort of technical part of his game didn't really quite happen for him, and that's why I thought I'd mention it, because yes, he was doing lots of good work up and down that left hand side, but when it came to that final ball, wasn't really there. But obviously, other than the fantastic assist, that pass on the outside of the defender to get the ball to Ayew to score was of course great to see. Now, in terms of the chances he had, it was quite easy for Villa to defend against. Whenever he had chances, Villa just basically got bodies in the way to deny him when he was shooting. So there's arguably not much he can do there. It's not like he can cut inside or he could have carried the ball to the left or the right of the defender, because they just basically put their body on the line and stopped him from scoring them chances. So realistically, I think the 7 is a fair result when you consider sort of the energy and that work rate he had down that left hand side. And I probably would have expected a little bit more in terms of his actual personal performance, but the fact that he was a team player, he was helping out Ayew, and obviously got that assist for Ayew to score, is the thing for me that really counts. So I do think Jeffrey Slupp does of course deserve the 7 I've given him. And of course that debate in terms of the midfield, does Jeffrey Slupp go back into the midfield and maybe MacArthur gets dropped out or Chiarte gets dropped out, and when Andros Townsend comes back in? So of course there's going to be a lot of debate, and we'll see sort of as players come back over the international break and players are also competing for their places, we'll see who plays against Tottenham, because it'd be really interesting to see the battles and sort of the competition we've now got for certain positions. But certainly Jeffrey Slupp didn't do his didn't do his possibility of continuing to play on the left any harm with once again another good performance. So now I'm going to move on to the right hand side, and that is of course where Wilfried Zaha was playing. I'm going to give him 6 overall because this was a performance where yet again he wasn't necessarily disappointing, but he wasn't necessarily great, and we know how good he can be. But obviously the fact that he's having a really slow start to the season, I suppose this is just yet another game where he's just getting back into the swing of things. Now, one of the things I really picked out is the fact that he looked quite isolated at times, and whether that's the fact that someone like Joe Ward weren't supporting him, whereas Van Aanholt was running up and down that left flank supporting people like Slup and Ayew, whatever it was. And obviously Zaha was looking quite isolated quite a lot of the time, and quite early on in the game, you know, even though we were dominating the game, he did sort of cut a frustrated figure, and I've seen that's a phrase a lot of people have used because that's exactly what he was, because he wasn't doing anything bad. It's just the fact that because he was isolated, because Villa were doing quite well to contain him, and the fact that we weren't actually supplying him just basically meant that he couldn't really get into the game, couldn't really get going, which is quite understandable. Now, obviously, you're looking at the chances he had, because he was so isolated at times, particularly in the first half, he had very few chances to get onto the ball, which was a little bit disappointing because we do know the threat he can be, so it would have been nice to actually see us at least try to get the ball to him a little bit more. But much like what I said with Luca, in the fact that he was a player who grew into the game, exactly the same case here for Zaha, where he grew into the game. And, you know, in terms of us getting onto that front foot and continuing to dominate the rest of the game in that second half, Zaha was quite crucial to that. And whilst there was none of his sort of outstanding tricks and flicks to actually get us far forward, the fact that he just had that influence in helping us get on that front foot by having more possession, by carrying the ball forward, by just getting in and around the Villa box is something that I was impressed with. So whilst it was a disappointing performance because he was isolated, because he didn't have that many chances, but then equally because he obviously grew into the game as he went on, I do think the 6 overall was a fair reflection. And obviously it is disappointing the fact that we haven't seen him get back to his best yet, but I'm sure that's going to come. You know, he obviously came back from AFCON quite late, so I think over the international break, having sort of a week and a half or so just to get back to his old self, having that week to build up your fitness, will obviously do him the world of good. And hopefully going into the Tottenham game with other players coming back into the team and everyone being fresh from that week's break, of course we'll see what you can do there. But once again here, Wilfried Zaha, I think these 6 is a fair result. So now I'm going to move on to the final player, and that is of course in our starting 11, that is Jordan Ayew, who I'm going to give a 9 overall. Now, a 9 is a rating that I very rarely give out, and it's when players have exceptional performances. You know, I gave him one last weekend, and I'm going to give him another one here because, once again, by far one of our best players, one of our most influential players, and just the absolute workhorse of the team, because I generally can't believe how hard he works for the team, and you know, that's one of the reasons I've given him a 9. But in terms of his job up top, obviously he scored for Palace, a really well taken goal, obviously helped out by that fantastic run and pass from Slup, but just that ability Ayew had to actually bring the ball to the byline and then get past 2 players, flick the ball up, and then obviously get in front of the goalkeeper and just sort of wedge it past him into the far corner. Was really great to see. So in terms of the goal he scored, it was off the utmost quality, you know, in terms of getting it past 2 defenders, then putting it far corner away from the keeper. But just that general hard work up top is why I've given him the 9, because he didn't seem to stop. And I'm surprised he has this amount of energy, because week in, week out, he gives 110%, chasing everything down, holding the ball up, bringing others into play, chasing every ball, even if he's probably not going to get it, still chasing it. So all that energy and that sort of commitment he shows in the game is something that once again really did impress me. Now, of course, before he did score, he obviously had a few chances to open the scoring, but obviously, you know, Villa done what they had to do and nothing came from it. But the fact that when he had that one moment to score, and when it came to it, he was able to score with a superb goal, like I've already said. And I suppose the goal was the right reward, I suppose, for how good he was in the game, because without that goal he probably would have got 7 or an 8 for his performance, because of that commitment, that determination, that energy he was showing. But that goal just sort of summed up, or sort of totted off, what was a superb all-round performance. And as we saw against Man United, his work rate, even though he got taken off towards the end of the game because he was knackered because of how hard he worked. And this was a game yet again where it was the same sort of thing, where he got taken off towards the end of the game just because he'd worked so hard. He was knackered towards the end of the game, and rightly does deserve the 9 I've given him, because this was a game where yet again he scored. And I suppose, obviously I keep talking about him scoring, you know, last season he only scored 2 goals for Palace, obviously 1 in the Cup, and 1 against Wolves. So he's already matched last season's goal tally within 4 games. Obviously 2 goals in 2 games as well. So hopefully there's more to come from him this season, because if he continues to play like this and we continue to play this sort of 4-3-3, 4-4-2 formation, that seems to complement him really well, and we seem to have found a striker that actually fits this formation. Now hopefully I don't speak too soon and I sort of jinx it, but Ayew seems to be a really value for money signing. Was it £2.5 million? He's already got 2 goals and he's performing really well. So if you can continue to score the odd goal here and there, as well as playing as well as he's doing, as well as putting in the amount of energy he's doing in this formation, in this system that seems to be working from him, hopefully we're going to see a lot more from him this season, because so far I've been really impressed with him this season. By far got to be up there as, statistically. I think you look on whoscored.com, he's the 2nd best rated player for Palace, and arguably if you ask Palace fans at the minute, the fact that he's scored 2 goals for us and been so influential, he's going to be, a top rated player. So long may it continue, and with the help of people like Zaha getting back to his full self, people like Jeffrey Slupp continuing to play well and complementing him well, hopefully there'll be more to come from Ayew this season. But once again, I do think the 9 is a fair result. Now in terms of the 3 subs we made in the game, obviously Jeffrey Slupp obviously came off, and obviously Andros Townsend came on in his place. Martin Kelly came off, sort of midway through the second half for Mamadou Sakho, and of course Ayew came off, as I've already mentioned, for Christian Benteke. So I should really mention these in order, so I might as well start. Mamadou Sakho obviously came on about, like I said, 79 minutes or so. I'm going to give him a 6 overall, because he came off Martin Kelly, and whilst his performance was good, he done what he had to do, and realistically he didn't have too much to do anyway, because obviously we were dominating the game anyway. It was just nice to see him come back from his injury, come back in, or nice to see him actually be in the squad for the game, and nice to see him come off the bench. So whilst there isn't really much to talk about his performance, he's missed several months of last season and this season, so it's nice to see him actually come back into the field and actually do relatively well. Obviously moving on to Andros Townsend, obviously came on for Slupp in the 84th minute. Really should have sort of mentioned these first time round, should have mentioned him in order, but of course Andros Townsend came on for Jeffrey Slupp, 84 minutes or so. Going to give him a 5, mainly because he was so late in the game. Given that late run out, wasn't really that much time to make an impact, and realistically maybe you could have expected a bit more from Townsend, but the fact that we already 1-0 up, it was more about conserving that lead we had, as opposed to trying to get that second goal, which we probably should have at least been trying to get that, because Villa's equaliser could have stood. But likewise, I suppose, the fact that Townsend wasn't really involved, didn't really have much impact, is just because we were trying to see out the game. And of course Christian Benteke came on for Ayew, 86 minutes or so. Once again, a player brought on just the final few minutes of the game, and basically didn't really have much to do. Came close to obviously netting Palace's second goal, shot that just went wide. So I suppose it's nice to see him getting into good positions, but I think I can't really give him anything higher than a 5 when you consider the fact that he wasn't necessarily as involved in the game as he would have liked. So, Mamadou Sakho, just to summarise the subs, Mamadou Sakho obviously coming on for Kelly, going to give him a 6, good performance there, nice to see him back. Obviously Andros Townsend came on for Jeffrey Slupp, not much time to make an impact, but helped us see out the game. And of course Christian Benteke here coming on for Ayew. Didn't do too much in the game, but when he got into a good position, he did, unluckily for us, put his shot just wide, but it didn't really matter for us anyway, because we went on to see the game out in the end anyway. Now obviously, just to sort of summarise the performance, I suppose the word to use is fantastic, because that's exactly what it was. We know we're not normally that good at home, so it's nice to see us obviously to get the win, but also to get the clean sheet at home with a very good performance, because people may look at the scoreline and go, 1-0, that's quite close, and the fact that they had a goal disallowed, or it wasn't really disallowed because it wouldn't have been scored, it shouldn't have been scored anyway because the ref whistle was already blown. But people may look at that and go, actually, it could have been 1-1 late in the game, and they might look at it, but actually it was a fantastic performance from Palace, dominated throughout. Particularly in the end of the first half, there was a great spell of pressure from Palace. We were really getting involved, and that first half alone, we probably should have been 1-0 up, in the fact that we just put on so much pressure on Aston Villa, had so many good chances, but obviously couldn't finish them. But I suppose what you've got to look at is that, yes, we probably should have scored in that first half, but the fact that we just remained calm, kept that nerve, and just continued the good work we done in that first half continued it into the second half, and the fact that they went down to 10 men, and then we just found that breakthrough really sort of epitomised how good our performance was, because we've seen so many times this season where it's been 0-0, we've been frustrated and we don't do anything about it, whereas here we kept trying, kept persevering, and eventually got what we deserved, player getting sent off, and then we found that breakthrough. And I suppose obviously we could talk about the team in terms of getting that breakthrough, but obviously Ayew was the main man. When the chance fell to him, that obviously his performance was good, but when that chance fell to him, he made no mess about it, finished his chance, put us 1-0 up, and that was great to see. But his performance alone, aside from the goal, like I've already discussed, was of course top notch. That confidence on the ball, that link up play, that is something we've been missing up top. He brought it into the team, and it didn't just obviously help him individually in terms of getting into these good positions where he can score, but actually it helped the whole team, because by having that good link up play, he's bringing other players into play, people like Luca and MacArthur, who of course had chances in and around the box, and that's something we've been missing, and that was quite key to us getting the result we did, because if we didn't have a striker who was looking to get others involved in play, had that energy, if we didn't have that, then we probably wouldn't have got that breakthrough midway through the second half. So of course Ayew was obviously quite crucial to that, and of course an unsung hero, I suppose. Obviously we got a clean sheet, so I've already given him quite a lot of praise talking about him, but Gary Cahill's leadership, aside from his performance, just that leadership, that organisation, and that willingness to actually get the ball back, push forward and play the ball forward was of course great to see. And it was nice to see him actually come on and play alongside Gary Cahill. And whilst James Tompkins is out, I'd really love to see Sakho and Cahill play together, because they could form a great partnership, because they're both sort of warriors, I suppose is the word Sakho liked to use, the soldiers back, the warriors back. That is exactly what they are. They put their body on the line, do what they can for the team, but in terms of their ball playing ability, both Cahill and Sakho are really good. So that's something I'd love to see going forward, because I do think it could form a great partnership going forward. Now overall, obviously a really great result here, and it's a bit disappointing now that there's an international break, because we seem to be building up a bit of momentum in the fact that we've got 2 wins on the bounce. That could have obviously gone on to the next game, but we've now got a 1-week international break. But after that we've got Tottenham. It's obviously not going to be an easy game, but nevertheless, we've shown what we can do against United. Just sit deep and just hit them on the counter-attack. So hopefully, I'm not really expecting much against Tottenham, but if we can do a similar sort of thing where we just stay solid at the back and then just hit them on the counter-attack, people like Zaha, Slup and Ayew sort of working together to get forward, then maybe something could come off the back of it. But hopefully, a few players coming back from injury, if we can continue that momentum, obviously from the games in the last few weeks or so, and of course it might be a good game in 2 weeks' time. So I'm now going to move on to my Man of the Match award, but before I do that and give you my Man of the Match, I thought had the biggest influence on the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now when you consider it was such a good team performance, I arguably could put loads more players into this shortlist, but as I normally like to narrow it down to 4 players, I do think these players who I've picked obviously are from a variety of different positions across the field, and I do think they reflect our result in the end, both defensively, in the midfield, and of course offensively as well. So the 4 players I've gone with Gary Cahill, Luka Milivojevic, Jeffrey Slup and Jordan Ayew. So a nice mix there between the defence, the midfield and the attack. Now in terms of Gary Cahill, just for the pure fact that he was so good defensively, but also because of that leadership. The fact that he showed leadership to guide the whole back four, to see us throughout the whole game. He was using the experience as well to help us contain Aston Villa. So the fact that he'd done that and marshalled the back line so well as aside from that Grealish incident at the end, just not putting a foot wrong, doing everything fine defensively, was obviously great to see. So for his defensive work, his leadership, his experience, everything about that is why I've put Gary Cahill forward. Obviously Luka Milivojevic, yes, this was one that's a little bit debatable, but I think that as the game wore on, he got better and better. He came close to scoring on a couple of occasions, cutting inside, forcing Heaton into a save. So the fact that he was doing his defensive work in terms of breaking up play, getting niggly fouls here and there, but also he was in these advanced positions, is why I've put him up for the award. Maybe a little bit of surprise, but just for that impact he made in terms of finding himself on the edge of the area, is why I've put him up for the award. Obviously Jeffrey Slup playing down that left hand side, Obviously, he was a threat throughout the whole game, and yes, he may not have had that end product, but the fact that he was linking up well with Jordan Ayew, being a threat in terms of, providing Ayew with that man to play off of, but also the fact that he got that fantastic assist for Ayew's goal by playing that ball perfectly around the defender so that Ayew could pick it up. So the fact that he was able to support Jordan Ayew so well, got the assist, as well as just looking a threat throughout the whole game, albeit without that inequality, is why I've put him forward. And of course, the man in the moment, Jordan Ayew. Obviously, there's so much to talk about him. The goal he scored, the fact that he worked hard, the fact that he was holding up the ball, he was bringing other players into play, the fact that aside from the goal, he had loads of other chances to score, and the fact that just that energy he showed all around is why I put him forward for the reward. Now, to be honest, considering the rating I've given him and considering all them things I talked about, it is quite obvious he's going to win this Man of the Match award. Same person as last week, so that's going to go to Jordan Ayew. So congratulations, Jordan. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was yet another solid performance from him. And to be honest, I don't think anyone can argue about this. He won the club's official one. He's won most of the ones on Twitter, and it's just because of his all-round performance. He scored the goal, he worked hard, had loads of energy, chasing things down, holding up the ball. Everything about his play was great, hence why I gave him the 9. But in terms of the man of the match, no one could actually even get close to him in terms of just that effort and energy he put into his performance. So if you do disagree with any of the 4 players I put on the shortlist, or you think someone else should have won it, of course feel free to comment them below. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got interviews with Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew, Cheku Karte and Jeffrey Slut following the game.
Jordan, back-to-back wins for Crystal Palace. What's your take on that performance today?
Well, I think we played very well and we deserved the victory. We did the basics right and we got rewarded at the end, so we just need to keep going, and congratulations to the guys.
Another Premier League goal for you. You really took it well.
Well, like I said, since I came to this football club, the staff, the president, the chairman, everyone have showed faith in me. So even if I had a difficult year last season, and they still had trust in me, and they signed me this year. So the only thing I have to do is to pay back on the pitch, and that's what I try to do. I work hard every day, and now it's paying off, and I hope it continues.
When you scored the goal, Christian Benteke was about to come on as a substitute. You won't have been aware, but he had to sit down because you scored.
Well, I don't pay attention to those things, and like I said, Christian is my very good friend, and obviously we all want to play, but the manager have chosen a system where we can play. But like I said, he's still my friend, and he's one of my very good friends. So there's no problem about that.
You mentioned getting the basics right. One of the basics is winning your home games. How important is home form?
Well, apparently it's been difficult. It's difficult for us to win games at home. But today we won, and like I said, one step at a time, and we just continue. It's still the beginning of the season, and we just keep on doing the basics right, and we get rewarded.
It's a step in the right direction today. Well done.
Cheku, a 1-0 win. What are your thoughts on that game?
Yes, very happy because we got the 3 points. It's been a hard game, but in the end, we win this game.
How much have you enjoyed the past 2 games being back in the side?
Yes, it's very nice. We keep the 0. We keep today the 0 clean sheet. It's very, very good for the confidence and for the whole team. Last week we win at Old Trafford. Today we win again. Yeah, it's very, very good for the team, and it's good for the confidence also.
Yeah, and one player who's confident at the moment, Jordan Ayew. That's 2 goals in 2 games in the Premier League now. He's really comfortable in front of goal.
Yes, I'm happy for him. Jordi work hard every time, and he want to score. Every time he score, he happy. But if he don't score, he not happy. This is the striker. He's good for him, for all team, and for his confidence. Yeah, just he need to keep going.
What's the team's done really well. If you look at the league table from February, we're way up there, 7 points already. What's the secret to the success defensively at the moment?
No, we start the season this year very, very good. Just continue to work hard, because if you want to have your achievement, you need to win every match. If you need to win, you win. If you don't have the chance to win, just keep the draw. But sometimes if you lose, it's very hard to come up. Now just continue to work hard, stay humble. Nothing is done. Just we need today to enjoy. But next week we start the work.
And finally, you didn't really have a break in the summer. How are you feeling?
Yes, I don't have break this summer, but it's good because they can happen sometime. After the African nation, I have some baby, but it's very nice. I'm happy. Just continue to work hard, just focus, and I need to take care for my body also. It's good. Now we have some bread. It's good for me, and I just need to have some relax.
Jeff, home win today and a clean sheet. Must be pleased with that performance.
Yeah, obviously we wanted to follow up that great result last week with another win at home, and I feel like from the first half all the way through to the game, we deserved it.
And involved in the goal as well. Jordan's got a lot of confidence at the moment.
Yeah, of course. We want our strikers to be scoring the goals, and Jordan's been really clinical in front of goal, and we're going to keep feeding him so that he can score some more.
How are you finding playing in that position today? Same one as you did against Manchester United.
Yeah, I've played there before. I feel comfortable anywhere down that left side, to be honest. But finding myself further forward, I want to get in and amongst the goals and assists, and I've done that today again as well as last week, and I want to continue doing that. So I'm enjoying playing further up the field.
And what's it like when the team goes down to 10 men? How does it change the game for you on the pitch?
Well, it changes it. They change shape, so we have to adapt to that, of course. But we wanted to keep the momentum going. We was playing up majority of the half in their half, and we wanted to keep that going. So we didn't want to change too much tactically wise, apart from carry on attacking a goal, and I feel we did that.
Quite a few chances today. How important is it for you guys that it seems to be started really well at home?
Yeah, it's a good start at home. This season, of course, we wanted to, it weren't we didn't have the best of results at home last year, and we wanted to change that this year. We wanted to make it a fortress again. The fans are great every time we play, and we wanted to pay them back with results, and so far so good.
And finally, just at the very end there with their disallowed goal, did you have a clue what was going on at the time?
Yeah, I was a bit confused. I was on the bench at the time. It was quite far, but we've watched it back in the change room, and I feel it was clear that the ref got the decision right, and we got the 3 points that we deserve.
Ultimately, a good week for your side because it's been bookended by two huge victories.
Absolutely. I think that it's unfortunate in some way for us, in terms of the way we played, that it's all going to sort of centre around the controversy at the end when Aston Villa believe they scored a goal and the referee has decided that he's seen a free kick for us before the ball goes in the back of the net. That's going to be the whole, the agenda around this game. I think it's a bit unfortunate for us, because I think that if you take away the first 15-20 minutes when I thought we weren't anywhere near our best, I think the next 70 minutes was a really good performance from our side. And really and truly, with all the opportunities we had, all the situations we created in their penalty area, all the corner kicks, all the wide free kicks, the number of times Tom had to make good saves or defenders had to make incredible blocks, really and truly, we could have been way out of sight long before that controversial situation. But also, having been in the game quite a long time now, you take these things. Today I'm taking it obviously with a smile because it's gone my way, but there'll come a time, I'm sure, as the season wears on, where I've got to take it with a scowl on my face, because I think I've been harshly treated. But as far as we're concerned, we've given two very good performances. Man United was a good performance and got us a victory. Today was a good performance and got us a victory. And of course, for teams like Crystal Palace, 6 points from 2 games, that is really worth its weight in gold.
You've mentioned the controversial moment, so I'll ask you further about it. What were your views on it?
Well, when you're on the bench, you can't make that type of decision that Kevin Friend made. But of course, we think when the ball breaks loose and they score the goal, we think we've thrown this away in the last minute and thrown away what should have been a very comfortable victory after a very good performance, and we're going to lose 2 points. Luckily for us, the referee had made his decision before the ball reached the guy who scored the goal, and he decided to stick with that and give us the free kick, which of course we're very grateful for. But I can understand that the Aston Villa people being upset about that decision, quite rightly so in that respect, because when that sort of thing happens to you and you seem to have got out of a defeat in the last minute and it's taken away from you, it's a tough pill to swallow. But I make no apologies for the fact that I thought that over the course of the 90 minutes we were clearly the better team, and I don't think we need to apologise at all for the fact that we won the game.
And I guess sometimes you need those moments to go your way, especially when you've been so patient and persevering throughout.
Of course. I mean, in the last two games, what good fortune is there to be had has gone our way, and that's very happy about that. It's not really something that has really been a massive part of my time at Crystal Palace, that, you know, year after year, game after game, we're lucky. There have been a lot of times, a lot of periods where we can say ourselves a little bit unlucky. But of course, it's all part and parcel of football. But I know one thing, that if you want to win games, you have got to establish some sort of domination. You have got to make certain you've got the ball in and around the opponent's penalty area plenty of times, and you've got to ask a lot of questions about their defenders and their goalkeepers if you want to win games. And we certainly did that today, and it gave us a win.
And you need a goal scorer as well, and you seem to have found one in Jordan Ayew, because that's 2 and 2.
2 and 2. Congratulations to him. His work rate, as usual, was exceptional, and on both occasions now he's topped up an exceptional performance in terms of his work rate, his tactical understanding of the game, by scoring 2 goals. It doesn't get much better than that. He's now got 2 weeks to enjoy that. We've got 2 weeks to enjoy it, but we're aware, of course, that some very big games coming up as well, so we won't allow ourselves to get carried away by this. We're thankful that 2 good performances have given us 6 points, and we know now what we've got to do. If we want to get more points, we've got to reproduce these performances.
And one final one from me. When Martin Kelly went off injured, you must have been thinking everybody's against us, because how many centre-halves of late have picked up knocks for you?
Well, it's a strain as well, and worse than that. Martin Kelly is the player that we would use if anything happened to Joel Ward, and Joel Ward did well to play today because he's also been suffering from a groin strain and hasn't been able to train all week. So he's actually come straight into the field from no training sessions after injuring himself against Man United. So
you've run over too many black hats recently, clearly.
But it's nice to see Mamadou Sakho back, and it's nice to see Tompkins back in training, and exceptionally nice to see Gary Cahill, who's joined us, play so well. That's 2 exceptional performances from him. So I'm not quite as worried as I might have been without a Gary Cahill and without a Sakho coming back.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Jordan Ayew, Cheku Kouyaté and Jeffrey Slapp had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast of the game against Aston Villa. But make sure to come back next week for my post-match review of the game against Tottenham Hotspur. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.